Report a little different than this one. You were in big snow boots and a parka. Times have changed as we get close now to the end of the season. How you been, bud?
Good, good. Flip-flops. You didn't tell me I'd have my feet on air. I would have got a pedicure quick.
Well, my dad's a podiatrist, so anytime we can work feet into the equation, we'll do that. So far, the reports you get, and right now this is the time of year where you're running around taking care of your college responsibilities, but you always are in touch with the high school guys, your key guys. What's the feedback you're getting right now about this high school season?
You know, I think we're seeing a switch in the way that lacrosse is being played, because the college rules now, it's a faster game with tempo, and you know, you have the timer-ons, and they're really promoting a faster type, up and down type lacrosse. And I'm seeing the two-way middies kind of reemerge from the old days. A lot of old school guys playing two ways, and it's phenomenal to see it at the high school level too, because I think they're preparing themselves to be elite college midfielders as well. So I would say the pace of the game from college, or even you can even say in Major League Lacrosse, to college to high school, trickling down for a faster game, which I think is great, because I had my concerns, Quick. I'm not going to lie to you. A couple of years ago, I thought the game was getting too slow.
All right, well, there you have it. So the Kark gives you his statement right off the top. On this edition of the Kark Report, we're going to break down your top middies, his top Fogos, and some of these Fogos are actually getting out there, running around, playing some midfield and the whole thing. So let's start with some of the middies that maybe aren't in your top 7, but guys that really have kind of jumped on the page. Sachem North has had a very good year. Big Joe doing his thing. Big Joe Caridi doing a great job this year.
Yeah, when I talk to Suffolk County coaches, Caridi is the type of midfielder who I just explained. A two-way guy, tough as nails. He's not that big, but his distribution and the way that he gets teammates involved, a true playmaker at the midfield position. Maybe not that big alley dodger that some of these guys are, but offensive production, you can't really deny.
When we've talked about some of these guys that you like, the sport of hockey continues to work into the equation with lacrosse. You love the Begley kid, hockey player at Morristown, not a premier program in New Jersey, but a premier player.
And I think he'll be a great player. He's going down to Loyola, and Loyola is the type of college team, 13 goals per game this year in the Division I ranks. They were #1 heading into the tournament, upset by Albany, but they play that brand of lacrosse that I'm talking about too. And I think Begley is old school. He's tough as nails. What he does between the two restraining boxes is much more effective than what he does as an offensive player. I think he's a two-way guy, a utility guy. You could put him on wings. He could play defense as well.
At Yorktown High School, Luke Palmadesso. Now, if you ask Chaminade who's the best player they played this year, they'd say number 11 on Yorktown. He was that good, and you're going to talk about face-off guys later. He was 11 for 11 that day. You have him in your middies, a very talented young man going to Villanova.
You could probably make the statement that Palmadesso means more to any elite team in the entire tri-state than any other player. And I say this because not many kids now face off at an elite level, stay on the field and play on the first midfield, play extra man. So this kid is as old school as it gets. Back in the day, people would face off, would stay on the field. You think of the greats, guys like John Reese, who played at Yale and was an All-American. Stay on the field, play extra man, play defense. I look at Luke Palmadesso. For my money, if you have to draft a team, he might not be your top midfielder, but top player. He might mean more to any team.
So that means he's going to get a big second contract.
Yes, absolutely.
Before we get to the Kark Super 7, there's one guy as we move on with the middies that I have to give a shout out to, because it just broke my heart when Mike D'Alessandro was injured right after we did your report here back in the preseason. And while he didn't play for Springer this year, and it was a reflection of their team because they struggled, he'll be ready to go at North Carolina. And put me in the mindset of Mike when he goes to North Carolina, where he's missed a year of athletics. How hungry will he be to play?
Well, I think he'll be salivating to play some big-time lacrosse. But as much as he's injured, I think what D'Alessandro has to do, because he was a raw athlete, a great football player, a midfielder that made plays due to his athleticism, he should take the rest of the spring, the summer, and next fall, just playing a ton of wall ball, get his stick skills to an elite level, and then when he's healthy, you combine the stick skills and his athleticism, he could be a college All-American for sure.
Athletically, he's as good as anybody that we talk about. Okay, the Kark Super 7. I'm so excited. He's going to be at number 7. I watched him in person, did not know a lot about this standout, Justin Zellen from Hauppauge, and I called you on the ride home, and I said, Kark, listen, and it's always the same thing. I don't know a lot about lacrosse, but I know athletes. Justin Zellen is one of the best-looking lacrosse players athletically I've seen this year. He's at number 7.
Well, he's 6'4". He's an absolute beast physically. He's going off to the University of Albany, and Scott Marr loves these type of kids because you can plug him in as a defensive midfielder. He can play wings on the face-off. But it's what he's doing with his lacrosse skills that is really impressive. He's not just an athlete anymore. He's a lacrosse player. So you talk about a guy like D'Alessandro to kind of find that combination. I think Zellen is, and Jim Conan, his coach, thinks he's one of the most underrated players in all of Suffolk County, and I'd have to agree.
I think he'd be a great football player on the College 1AA level. Will Robinson, Mendham. I'm going to be honest with you. Don't know a lot about him. Going to Yale, why do you like him so much?
I saw him a lot in the summer, Quick, and he's a big kid as well. He can fly up and down the field, but I love his stick skills, too. I think that he's really creative offensively. He's not that cookie-cutter type kid where he's programmed to do something at every time or listening to a coach to make a certain move. He makes those instinct-type plays at midfield that I think are so valuable. It's the ground balls, it's starting transition. And I think Robinson plays as a freshman at Yale. And Yale's had a lot of success the last couple of years, been in the hunt for the Ivy League. So to get on that field as a freshman for Robinson will be tough, but my money's on it.
Earlier this year, Chaminade was hosting West Islip, and it was probably 3 weeks after we did the first Kark report. And when you broke down your middies, one of these young men who's on it now wasn't on it then, Sean Cerrone. And I said, Sean, Kark didn't have you. He goes, no, I know. I said, well, you better make sure you're on it next time. He's a gamer, he's a clutch player, he's a football player with quarterback skills that he brings and makes everybody better for Chaminade.
Well, you look at a kid like this, and Cerrone is a product of the system. Jumps on the scene late because all Chaminade kids do. They're playing freshman, JV, and then varsity. So you don't see him early. But what he's doing in his senior year, you can't deny. You talk about the clutch moments. I mean, 2 game-winning goals in a week. Just has that it factor. And I look at what Villanova's doing. You get a Palmadesso and a Cerrone out of that senior class in the Tri-State. From a midfield standpoint, you have versatility, you have depth, and you have ballers.
Absolutely. The year started, Jordan Walter for Cold Spring Harbor was playing wonderful lacrosse, had that great game against Manhasset where he scored the game winner, beat him 10-9. Kind of then went into a bit of malaise. Now all of a sudden the Notre Dame bounder has his mojo back. A wonderful looking athlete with great giddy up.
Speed, that's what I look at with Walter. And he's the type of kid. You look at the way Notre Dame's playing offense right now. They're really putting a lot of stock in their two-way middies, guys that go end-to-end. Guys like Jack Neer, who was from Bronxville a couple years ago. He's one of the most valuable middies in the nation. I think Walter might not step on the field right away as an offensive middie, but his speed, what he can do in transition, they'll find a spot for this kid because I think, you know, he's got the skill, too. He's got a really good stick. But when you play offense at the college level, it takes time. It takes adjustment. It's like a wide receiver in football or a quarterback. You got to get used to the speed. The good thing for him is he's athletic enough where they'll find a spot for him on the field.
You like guys with swagger?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Kark's number 3 guy has some swagger. Smithtown West, Christian Zawatsky going to Maryland. The dude plays with some swagger.
He does. You look at his stick skills, his offensive awareness. One of the top guys in the Tri-State in terms of what he brings to the table in the 6-on-6 set. You can't defend him as a shooter because he can feed the rock. He's got great stick skills. He can split a double team. I think Zawatsky is the type of kid, you look at what they're losing at Maryland. You got Mike Chanichuk. He's a senior All-American this year. He's departed. You got a couple other guys. He'll play as a freshman for a team that's entering the Big Ten that needs those type of big-time players to play on the offensive end. So what he does for the rest of his senior year, I think will dictate his mental state in terms of how he approaches the offseason, but the skill is there for sure.
If we did your Middie report about 2 weeks ago, I seriously doubt that Fairfield Prep's Austin Sims would be at number 2. The Princeton bounder started the year hobbled by injury. He's gotten into his groove now. He's playing wonderful lacrosse for the Jesuits.
You can't deny the athletic ability, and I tell kids all the time, and you look at these middies too. You have football players, you have hockey players. These guys are all dual sport type kids. Sims, a phenomenal soccer player. When you watch him play in the full field, his awareness, his speed. You cannot teach those types of things. And one thing I think Princeton has really been missing is athletic ability at the midfield. They've had great guys, and Tommy Schreiber, phenomenal athlete, but from a depth standpoint, they really haven't had a ton of guys who could fly all over the field. He's just what the doctor ordered, because Princeton didn't make the playoffs this year, and they have to make the playoffs. There's a lot of history. There's tradition there. There's 6 national titles since 1990, 1992. So he's the type of guy that I think he plugs so many holes, and I think for a kid like Sims, he has to get a little bit better in terms of his offensive skill, because double teams come faster in college. But I just love his awareness. And I go back to that dual sport thing. You can't be a great college midfielder just on stick skills. You have to be able to move. You have to be able to make plays, and that's what Sims has been doing since he started at Fairfield Prep.
So it's pretty similar then between your 2 and 1, your number 1 guy, dual sport athlete, terrific in football, going to a program that's legendary in Georgetown that has struggled mightily. Help is on the way with Massapequa's Craig Burge.
Help is on the way, and Coach Kevin Warren is identifying some of the top talent in the tri-state. You look what he's doing from a midfield recruiting standpoint. You have Burge. He's bringing in Bucaro the year after from Ward Melville at the attack. Identifying needs, but Burge isn't just the best midfielder in the tri-state. I think he's the best lacrosse player in the tri-state. And I say this because he's a selfless individual, and you rarely see midfielders quick feed the ball like he does. I mean, he feeds the ball like college midfielders, guys who have been in a system 2 or 3 years and finally get the progressions offensively. Burge has had it for the last few years. I mean, it's easy to teach a midfielder to shoot on the run. It's really hard to teach a midfielder to shoot on the run, roll back, identify a double team, and dish it and make every single kid on your team better. And that's what Burge does. Burge is a quarterback type point guard playing midfield. None of those other guys do it like Burge.
Did you go to your senior prom?
I didn't.
You didn't?
I didn't. And can I tell you why?
Yeah, I'd love to know.
I didn't have a girlfriend.
Really?
And my mother gave me the money for the prom. And I really had a big-time golf itch. I ended up 2 weeks before the prom buying new golf clubs, and I had no cash, but I was at the after party.
Oh, of course you were. Burge is going to the prom. Now, you mentioned all these great intangibles.
Yeah.
The one thing you didn't mention, this cat's smooth. Did you see how he proposed? Did you see how he asked his girlfriend to the prom?
No, what did he do?
This cat set up balls in front of the crease.
Yeah.
Lacrosse balls that spelled out prom with a question mark.
Oh, how can you say no to that?
And he's taken his beautiful girlfriend, Katie Stackpole.
Good job, Burge.
From Kellenberg, who's a great player in her own right. Burge is a stud.
Yeah,
okay, so
I like
now,
the kid.
if I'm Greg Galligan at St. Anthony's going to Georgetown, if I'm Sam Bonafide at Chaminade going to Princeton, I'm saying to myself, come on, Kark, what's the deal? Why aren't these guys on?
I just look at the midfielders and as a whole. Not that these other guys aren't great two-way middies, but I want more than just goals. I want more than just production. That's not to say anything about those other guys, but here's the beauty of it. We're in the middle of May right now. Mm-hmm. At the end of the year, I always think that it's the same in college. What do you do for your team down the stretch? And there's probably a dozen kids that we talked about that are in the mix. They certainly will deliver and can make the final first or second tri-state team if they take their team to new heights. And that's the beauty of sports. I say it all the time. It's not what happens in the beginning of the season or the middle of the season. The great ones, it's like in anything. LeBron came over to another level or jumped all of those lofty expectations when he had a trophy and a ring. And that's like that in every sport. It's the difference between Tom Brady and some other guys in the same discussion. It's what you do for your team, and you as an individual lacrosse player, and in this case, midfield-wise, can you take your team from good to great?
So Kevin Quigley right now is saying to himself at Ridge High School, I'm going to prove to Kark, you mentioned me in the beginning, and I'm going to be that guy who gets Ridge on a magical roll. And that's what's, you know what would be great? If 2 of the 3 middies that make the postseason team, we don't talk about in this one. It'd be great.
We've done that a lot. We've
we
had goalies who aren't in the top 5 in the middle of the season that end up being a first or second team tri-state recipient.
When you were back playing, both at Yorktown and Syracuse, as we switch from the middies now to the face-off guys, how big, and coming to learn this sport, to me, other than a goaltender, if you can't win faceoffs, you can't win games. But yet you don't see a lot of people when they write up the games that it's a stat yet in lacrosse, like in box scores. How big is controlling the ball in this sport?
I'll tell you this much. If I was a college coach with a full allotment of scholarships, every 2 years, I would back up the truck and spend a ton of dough. And colleges don't have a lot of money, 12.6 scholarships, spread that over 45, 55 guys. I would back up the truck until they tell me the rules are changing with a kid every other year. So when a kid's a senior, I have a sophomore ready to go. The sophomore becomes a junior, there's a freshman coming in. Back up the truck with big money to spend on these kids. Because if you have pieces to a puzzle, but you don't have the ball, nothing in lacrosse or sport is more important than the ball. And you can argue that a face-off man in lacrosse is more critical to his team's success. When you put 10 teams that are all very similar in terms of their skill set, the biggest difference is face-off play. As much as goalies can stand on their head and make 20-something saves, face-off guys dictate the outcome of the game more than any player in lacrosse.
You love great stories, right?
Yeah.
Human interest. I know your college lacrosse season comes to an end on Memorial Day. Now, I really want you to come to the Del Barton Bergen Catholic game. And from the opening moment, I'm going to throw one at you here, and it has to do with the face-off. The greatest face-off that we will see this year, and neither is on your list right now, but the most intriguing face-off will be when Connor Mackey from Del Barton gets down on a knee. Coming over from Bergen Catholic is Brendan Mackey. Brothers.
Oh, that's
They're
amazing.
brothers. I mean, isn't that where you're coming now?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, their dad's
amazing.
so excited. It's going to be great. That's the type
incredible.
of moment where you have a camera, if you're televising the game, on the mother.
Well, we'll put it this way. This coming weekend in college lacrosse, Kevin Massa, Suffolk County kid, plays for Bryant. Charlie Raffa, St. Anthony's, plays for Maryland. These two kids are arguably, with Fowler from Chaminade at Duke, the best face-off guys in the nation. That will be an absolute steel cage match. And I would say that when you look at the bottom line and the stats at the end of the game, look at the face-offs, and then we'll talk about who wins that game.
All right, good. I love it. I love it. All right, so let's break it down. A couple guys. Do you want to list your top five, or do you just want to throw guys out? How do you want to do this?
I think we'll just talk about it as a whole, because, you know, I think you have elite guys, okay, that have now specialized and taken the position to a new level. You can't ham and egg this position anymore. Back in the day, you could throw a guy out there, beat up someone, big, strong athlete, fight for the ball. These guys are so technical and so dialed into their trait that you don't have a chance unless you're a specialized face-off guy. That's why you look at guys like Northport's Henningsen. This kid faces off and probably has a whistle in his head going off in his dreams. Yeah. You know, Gerard Arceri, kid from Smithtown East. I mean, this kid is one of the best young face-off men in the nation. He's only a sophomore. I saw him play a ton. Those two battled out this past week, and I heard it was epic. But Arceri is so technical and so poised and great at his craft, I can say slam dunk, he will be a college face-off All-American.
Right now?
Without question.
As a sophomore going to Penn State?
Because I see how good he is. And it's almost like a wrestler's mentality. Face-off guys are different. They're so competitive and so dialed into what they do great that it's like a wrestler. You're not going to bet against a kid, and he's not going to lose that chip or that edge.
You know who will agree with your assessment 100%? Call Bob Maltasanti at Smithtown West. A Siri, in their big upset victory against their crosstown rivals, won 19 of 23. Who's this young man that plays for your buddy Colsey up at Ridgefield? I've watched this Matt Philbin kid a lot. He's come from nowhere, wasn't on the team a year ago, kind of taking care of some grades issues, and now has become one of the best, not just in Connecticut, but in the entire tri-state.
Well, put it this way, with early recruiting, you have a kid like this who is going to burst onto the scene late. But as the college seasons end and the high school coaches go to the state playoffs, when they find out that this kid doesn't have a home, that's going to change. I know he's going off to prep school, he'll work on his grades, he'll get everything done that he needs to. He will have no trouble finding a home.
I'm glad that our buddy James Sullivan from Garden City is getting healthy. In the beginning of the year, very quietly, had an issue with his hand, and I watched him go up against Philbin in the Battle of the Sound earlier this year at Darien High, and Maddie got the better of James. Now the hand is healthy, and he's getting the ball a lot.
Well, you look at Garden City 2 years ago when this kid was a freshman, as good as Dwyer was, Devin Dwyer was the Tri-State MVP. You could say Sullivan was the difference in that season, because he let that offense with Gutterdane and Dwyer have multiple reps and put so much pressure on the opposing team's defense. And as he got older, they asked him to do a little bit more, where freshman year he's facing off. Now he's more of a midfielder, which I think is great. But what's going to happen when you become more of a midfielder, like a kid like Palmadesso? Your reps at the face-off X have to be sacrificed, because when you're going out time and time again to play offensive reps and then being asked to face off against a guy who's sitting there, can't wait to get his hands on the next face-off, and he's well rested, that's a tough task. So as a kid like Sullivan or Palmadesso, and I think Palmadesso, from a face-off and utility and all-around midfielder, you could argue that he's the best of the bunch. But from a face-off specific standpoint, Palmadesso and Sullivan suffer when they go into these elite matchups, because the guy that they're going against is just waiting for that next face while he's going up and down the field.
You just asked me before, are Suffolk County kids tougher than us? They do, right?
Yeah.
They have a toughness. This kid,
Something in the water.
It is.
Something in the water.
Calvagno. Now that just sounds, facing off for Sachem North, Mike Calvagno. He sounds like a guy who's going to get down there, just tear it up and get the ball, going to Stony Brook. And he has made Sachem North a major player in Suffolk A.
And the timing of him going to Stony Brook is spectacular, because they had a freshman face-off man who's actually transferring. This freshman face-off man for Stony Brook was one of the best in the nation. Rumor is he's going to Duke or Virginia and looking at a couple other schools. So Calvagna, not only dominating now, he's going to have an opportunity to be a face-off guy right away in big-time Division I lacrosse. But going back to the Suffolk County, the toughness of these kids in that Suffolk County A-League, you cannot find a deeper league in the entire country. I mean, these guys just go at it week in and week out, beating each other up. You know, you got to ask the question down the road, are they battle tested or battle fatigued? Because they beat each other up so bad that it's interesting to see, will they get through a team like Massapequa and just bury them because they're battle tested? Sure. Or are they shot at the end of the year because they've just been beating each other up all year?
That's what we're all waiting to see, because I think everybody thinks Massapequa is going to beat Syosset and Nassau, go back to the Long Island title. And these kids from Massapequa, Burge and all those guys, Burns, Kirby, they want this. Tierney, they want this. When you think of sport, you know, there's certain names that just ring true. Like, you say it and you know it, right? Like in basketball, you say Jordan. Okay, right. Yeah. I really think the name Sullivan for the face-off guy is now the name. We've talked about James. Have you heard about this cat, Jack Sullivan from Rocky Point?
I heard he's crushing it too. I mean,
oh my gosh.
He told me he's making all the difference in the world. I mean, and that's the beauty of this face-off. As we spent so much time on midfield and face-off guys, these guys don't go unnoticed. I mean, you say you're really not a lacrosse guy, but guess what? You are. You've been covering the sport long enough where you know. So you have a kid like Sullivan out in Rocky Point. If he's giving his team 10 times more opportunity to score goals, and he's changing the way that the opposing teams go on runs, you can't go hidden. You can't. I mean, if face-off guys, like a lot of people argue about face-off men and say we're putting too much stock into these kids and they determine the outcome of the game too much and they're just face-off guys and they're not lacrosse players. But guess what? Until they change the rules, they're the most valuable guys out there.
Just like kickers in football, buddy.
Yeah.
You know, just like kickers in football. And then so we've talked about James, we've talked about Jack. Greenwich is very relevant this year. They always seemingly have good faith. Mike Sullivan has done a very good job for Buckley this year and the Cardinals. And there is no team in the tri-state this year who has improved more from 2013 to this year than Darien High School. And you'll talk about their wonderful defense, and you'll talk about Hufford in the goal. But what they couldn't do last year was win possessions. And Andrew Pugliese is a major reason why that Braemeyer's Blue Wave, as of the taping of this, are still undefeated. They have the ball. They didn't last year.
You have the ball. You want to win games in lacrosse right up the middle. When I say right up the middle, you have your face-off play and your goaltenders. And if you have two of the better guys in the area, and you have great supporting cast and kids who have been playing lacrosse together since they're in 2nd and 3rd grade, I mean, do the math.
probably the most important question that I'll ask you in this segment as when we air this, it's going to be right around Memorial Day weekend. A guy like you, X's and O's, knows everything about the sport. You know about the fifth face-off guy in every college. But to me, the thing that I need to know is how much effort, how much time, and how much preparation will you put in to what you wear on Memorial Day weekend? You're into great feedback on the first one. I heard some really nice things they said about you. Did you get any good stuff?
I got some things, some little hate mail too, and guys, no, I'm kidding, no,
okay.
We're all good.
Kark, you know, one thing before we break out the attack, and that's what we're going to talk about in this Kark Report, when you go around to all these colleges, they know you're affiliated with a lot of high school guys. Do they ever say to you, hey, Kark, some of these guys that have already committed to us, we could use them right now? You
know, that's a great question, Quickie, because when you look at when I played in the early 90s in Yorktown, we didn't have the type of athletes that are playing now. The skill was certainly there, and it could rival the skill today and even surpass the skill today. But I think kids now, the way they train physically, they're so fit and ready to play at the collegiate level. So you can plug these guys in. Some of these guys at sophomore, junior year, they're like men already. So yeah, they're chomping at the bit to get these studs.
On the old Quick 60 show, we used to have you do your top 6 by position. We're going to change it up a little bit this year. We're going to have the Kark Super 7. And every week we're going to throw some other guys into the mix to get it started. We're at a Yorktown Ridgefield game in your backyard. So let's start with Simon Matthias, great player, great attack guy for Ridgefield going to Penn.
Yeah, so smooth. He's never rattled. I love the speed of the game for Matthias. He's going to Penn. I think it's a great choice for him. He's Coach Colsey's quarterback here at Ridgefield. He runs the offense, a great distributor, but I've been impressed with Matthias. As a junior now, he's turning the corner and becoming a goal scorer.
When you're in Ridgefield and you say the name Decker Curran, they don't like that because Decker Curran earlier this year for Greenwich, a junior who's going to Michigan, scored the game winner in the 4th overtime. He sends everybody home 8-7 winner.
Total stud, skill set off the charts. He's going to Michigan. Perfect place for him. I think John Paul will get this kid on the field early and often, and Decker Curran's stick skills might be as good as any attackman in all of the tri-state.
Dan Bockelman plays in big boy Suffolk A for Hills East. Not one of the power schools, but Cornell's getting a good one.
They are. A little bit of a late bloomer in terms of being on the national stage, Bockelman. But I talked to some coaches out in Long Island, too. Jim Conan from Hop Hog really told me about this kid. Watched some tape. Strong as an ox, turns the corner, a goal scorer, and a bear to defend.
Alex Kankanen. He's been at Syosset forever, and right now he's on the verge of maybe getting into that Super 7 at the end of the year.
He is. An early success for Kincannon, and it's so tough to turn from good to great, and I think he has, but there's just so much depth right now at this position. And Kincannon, I think the biggest thing he needs to do moving forward is become a true quarterback, a distributor, because that kid with a left hand gets to top side as good as anyone. He's got a great two-handed cradle. He's almost like a Canadian playing attack on Long Island.
Patty McCormick from Hicksville putting up big numbers again.
I do, and you look at McCormick, a slasher, a very good athlete. I like the way he gets to the middle of the field. He's a tweener guy, too. I think in college he might play midfield. A lot of college coaches are putting the top 6 offensive players on the field at once. McCormick will find a spot at UNC, maybe not as a freshman. Down the road, certainly they're going to have to find a place offensively for him because of his skill set, his toughness, and his quickness.
When you have a big-time rep and your team maybe struggles a little bit, and Northport's having a good year, but they're not that upper echelon Suffolk A, a guy like Rocco Sutherland, he's a marked man.
He is, and Rocco Sutherland, for my money, is one of the best junior attackmen in the country. And I love the way that he breaks down a defense. He's never rattled as well. I watched a lot of Rocco this past summer, and I thought his game just evolved. He's going to be a stud. He's going to the University of Maryland. He will play early and often for the Terps. Sutherland, with Northport's drop a little bit, maybe not getting the recognition. He's a stud, though.
This is the part where Kark starts to get nice fan mail or bad fan mail. We go from 6-pack to Super 7 this year. And in your preseason, you didn't mention Henry Grass as one of the better players because we just didn't have time. But right now on the first Super 7, the Bronxville Junior, he's there.
You can't deny his ability to get to the rack. I mean, this is a kid, he's a marked man. Every single time he steps on the field, Quickie, he's a great right-handed dodger. He splits defenders up. Every marquee defender that's guarded Grass, he's dominated. You really don't have a matchup for this kid. Bronxville maybe not playing the schedule of some of these Long Island teams, but his overall skill and his ability to get to the rack right-handed. Now, as teams slide and load up the bus on grass, he will have to become more of a quarterback and a distributor. I think he has that in his game as well.
Do you remember the name Michael Stonebreaker? He played linebacker for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
That's a great linebacker name. Like a name for a goalie that wouldn't be good is Blewett.
Yeah.
A name for an attack man that's good is Blewett, because Chris Blewett's been blowing by people at Bergen for 4 years. Only a handful of guys in Joe Hammerly's 20 years at BC have been 4-year starter. He's one, and to steal a baseball term, he's like a switch hitter, because it doesn't matter what hand you defend, he can score.
He's a bear to defend too, Quickie. And Blewett's one of those kids, early success, but not that national buzz. He's going to St. Joe's, which is now turning into an elite Division I program, but by all standards, kind of a second-tier Division I school. But they're getting these late bloomers like Blewett, guys who jump on the national stage, and he is dominant. I talked to some Jersey coaches. He draws a double as quick as anyone in the state. He can score, he can feed, and I think Blewett is probably the best attackman in New Jersey, hands down right now.
I feel honored. I almost should be wearing a Yorktown jersey, because behind us at this game